So Donnel, here we are. We're back together, sending this little podcast or this little video cast out to everybody who made a gift at Fresh Energy's Benefit Breakfast. And I have a few more questions for you. I want to hear you talk a little bit about capital markets and how you turn the world of capital markets to come to your door and invest in BlocPower. A lot of people are interested in climate tech and clean tech and startup companies that are going after the climate problem with a profit motive. If you don't mind telling us, give us a little preview of the story of how you attracted private investment into your firm.
Well, we didn't. Thank you for the question. I mean, we did not have an easy road with capital markets and raising private capital. In most instances, we had a large government contract that we won, and were able to raise capital against the government contract that we won to say, well, look, we have a contract with a set of revenues and data, which is valuable. And if you invest in our company, we think we're going to access this capital and make it to the next milestone. And so I don't think raising capital is that difficult for lots of other folks who don't have my profile, but for me, it was quite difficult. We met with 200 investors initially. It was the 204th meeting before we actually got a yes. And so the 204th and 205th folks were Mitch Kapor and Ben Horowitz, Kapor Capital and Andreessen Horowitz. Their names are on the door. And I was fortunate to get the chance to meet with both of them. And they both decided to invest. And that was the foundation of our company. And this last fundraising round, we had a lot of help from American Family Life Insurance Company, which is out there in the Midwest. Not too far from you guys in Wisconsin, in Madison, and then Goldman Sachs, who came on as strategic partner. And so Goldman, lent us $50 million of debt and invested in our venture capital round. And we've had a very patient, warm, collaborative. I mean, Goldman. It's a tough place, but we were fortunate to work with Margaret Anadou and Mike Lohr, and they're amazing human beings and amazing business people. And so even when we didn't know what we were talking about, they were very patient with us. And over 3.5 years, frankly, they have supported us and kind of coached us informally until we were at maturity to where we could access capital from them formally. And so that relationship with Goldman was a strategic partnership, even before it was a formal strategic partnership. And that was kind of the story of how we got Silicon Valley involved in BlocPower, how we got Goldman Sachs involved in BlocPower. And now what we need to do is just continue to hit our goals and milestones. And if we do that, hopefully they'll continue to reinvest and help us grow our company. And if not, hey, $3 trillion of infrastructure money coming down the pipe. We'll figure it out.
That's true. So, we love this story so much. Hashtag electrify everything. You see it all over the place. But I always add electrify everything we can, because maybe we're not going to electrify all the air travel or all the heavy industry, but we should electrify everything we can. And ironically, electrifying transportation is a lot more obvious than electrifying all the buildings and all the hot water. Can you talk a little bit about the electric grid itself and what it might be like, what kind of pressures are going to put on the system to really have America demand 3 times more electricity than we're demanding now if we really do electrify everything we can and it turns out to be almost everything?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm talking to you on my iPhone 10, right? And iPhone 10 has a computing capacity that dwarfs the computing capacity of, the compact that my mom bought in 1996. And it dwarfs whatever IBM was doing in the 60s. I'm not a computer science historian, but I know there were giant mainframe computers. And I watched that movie with the 3 African-American astronauts. Anyway, their computing has shrunk, right? Like the size of the actual hardware of the chips has continued to shrink year over year. I think there's a technology law called Moore's Law that speaks to this. And so computing has shrunk. It's now shrunk down to the size of an iPhone, a credit card. We have decentralized computing from this kind of centralized thing that was super expensive that only specialists could access to something that, like, my kid picks up my iPhone and gets on YouTube and knows what he's doing. I mean, I wish he didn't, but it's so easy to use and so accessible to access supercomputing. So that's one example. A second example is, now that we have this platform of mobile computing, we've decentralized media. It used to be, and I'm 40. I remember I'd come home and my mom would be watching the evening news, and we got to know the anchors over time, and they were our primary mechanism for receiving the news. Or we'd read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution or the New York Times. And media was centralized and news was centralized. But now everything is decentralized. There's social media. What's happening on TikTok or Twitter, in many cases, is more relevant and much faster than what's happening on normal incumbent centralized news. So our view is that a similar macro trend is occurring in energy. Now, we're not quite there yet, and you're an expert, so you know this better than I do. But energy will be decentralized, like media, like computing. We will move away from large, centralized fossil fuel power plants that feed electricity and energy into the electricity grid, right? To smaller, modular, distributed systems on a home-by-home basis, or maybe on a block-by-block basis, or even on a town-by-town basis, but certainly not a whole states on this transmission line with giant wires and substations and all that kind of stuff. Like, we are moving away from that from a technological perspective. Climate change and energy resiliency demand it. The business case from customers demands it. If you're in New Orleans or Houston or Dallas and you've been without power for weeks and weeks, you're going to be looking at a distributed energy system to provide backup power to your home, whether that's solar or battery or, diesel backup generator, whatever. You're going to be looking at distributed energy solutions. And so we think 10, 15, 20 years from now, energy grid is going to be more distributed. All of the devices are going to be smart and interconnected with some kind of software layer. We'll see if that's Siemens or GE or a startup or Google or whatever. But there's going to need to be a traffic cop that's almost more of an energy marketplace that allows you to produce energy, sell some to your neighbor, store some, blah, 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 blah. And so the question is, how do we get there? And what is the necessary hardware, software, and infrastructure financing and venture capital financing that is needed to put us in that kind of place? But that's where we want to be. And you can see parts of that system already, developing in small pockets around the country. And so the question is, how do you scale that? But I believe that that's the way things are headed. I mean, what do you think?
I agree with you. I think there's an energy revolution that's underway, and it's just going to accelerate even faster and faster. The technology, I love your example of the iPhone. The technology changing fast. The costs are plummeting. The technology is getting better. Public policy is getting in alignment. All we need to do is have the political will to get the decisions made, and then capital can flow to the right solutions to solve the problems. I'm going to ask you one more personal question, and I'm going to let you get on to your busy day. I know you're planning some important meetings you mentioned at the beginning of our talk today. Tell me something about what is your personal driver and your personal motivation that makes you do this work. What is it that drives Donnel Baird to be the person you are and take this enormous challenge of electrifying buildings all across America? What is it about it?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. One, I believe in climate change. I didn't learn much about climate change in high school, but in college, one of my best friends sat me down and walked me through it. Watched Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, just knew it was true, totally sold. I'm a believer in the climate crisis or catastrophe, which is where we are. That's one. Two, I have a 6-year-old kid named Nash Cooper Baird. And if there is a climate catastrophe, that means that I, as a father, am leaving him to grow up in a catastrophe. And I won't have that. And then three, I think that we should decarbonize buildings because we can. It is possible to make buildings healthier, smarter, more valuable, more profitable, and greener. They're better for building owners, they're better for tenants, and it's way better for the planet. It's possible to do it, and we should do it. When I talk to Apple or Salesforce or Google or Goldman, all their buildings are green. They're not burning oil and pumping smog and air pollution into their cubicles and offices where their executives work. Their buildings are green. Their buildings are pristine. All we're saying is that every homeowner in America should have access to the same technology as Apple and Google and Salesforce, right? Because it simply is better. And so the question for all of us is, how do we make this better product affordable and accessible to many, many more Americans? And how do we speed it up, that accessibility? And so it is possible for us to speed it up. And so it's unconscionable to me that we could do better and leave behind a better planet for your kids, for my kids, for their kids, that we could do it, but that we as parents would not do it. That's insane. So insane or not, we will continue at BlocPower to pursue decarbonizing buildings until it's completed. Then after it's completed, I'll move on and do something else. But until the 125 million buildings are green and they've reduced 20, 40, 60% of their fossil fuel waste, then we'll keep on greening buildings.